Well, good evening. Good evening. Glad you're all here tonight. It's a good problem to have to bring in more chairs. So I'm thankful for you being here tonight. I'm Kurt McInnes. I'm a faculty member in the Literature Language Department here at Chipola, and I'd like to welcome you all to our inaugural Chipola Poetry Cafe. When you start something like this, it's your hope that it will go on for many years and that you can hand it off to somebody one day when you retire, maybe even. And that's our hope for this. Maybe this will become a yearly event. April is National Poetry Month, so that's why we chose this time to draw attention to poetry as an art form and to celebrate the poetic talents of local writers. I want to give special thanks to several people, and the acknowledgments are on the back of your program, but I want to say it one more time because I couldn't have done it without all of these people who are involved. I want to thank, first of all, my colleagues in the Literature and Language Department who have been so supportive, and when I said, let's do this, they said, let's do it. And so they've been so supportive and encouraging, and I want to thank them. Thanks to Evelyn Ward. What you see here in front of you with these nice tables and chairs and tablecloths and a microphone and lighting and everything, and bringing in more chairs is all because of her and her staff. So thanks, Evelyn. She's up in the sound booth. Thank you to Charity Socorro and Phi Theta Kappa for all the wonderful goodies that you are out on the table, the coffee and desserts, many of them handmade from scratch. So please take advantage of those before you leave tonight. Thank you to Bonnie Smith and the Honors Program. I've been joking that it's easy to fill up a space when you got 40 people that are required to be here. So, but I don't feel bad about that at all. You're going to learn something tonight, you honors folks. So this is an honors seminar. Thank you to the poets that are represented here. There are many more, and others that could have read and were not able to. And I just want to thank you for being here. This means a lot to me, and I think it's a wonderful thing that you're here. And I want to thank Jamie. This is Jamie Jones. I'm going to introduce him in a minute, but he drove about 3 hours to get here, and he's got to drive back tonight. So I really appreciate him for doing that. Tonight's program, as you can see, we're going to start with Jamie. He's going to speak to us, tell us some stuff, read from his own works. After that, our own poets here from this community will speak. And then after they're done, we would like to have a short question-answer time. So if you have questions about the poetic process or getting published or whatever questions you'd like to ask to Jamie, we would entertain those after or at the very end. So be thinking about any questions you might have, and we'll take a few. We can't go on all night, but we'll take a few at that time. Okay. Also, out on the table in the vestibule here are some books, and you can. There's some. My wife's sitting out there, and she can tell you all about those prices and things like that as you go. And as again, don't forget the refreshments as well. Well, the generating idea for this event occurred this past summer when I attended the Florida Master Teacher Seminar in Pensacola. There I was privileged to meet many outstanding teachers from schools in our state college system. And one of those teachers was our speaker tonight, Jamie Jones. Jamie has long been involved in the poetry scene of Pensacola. There he has promoted many events that spotlight local poetic talent. But in addition, he has been instrumental in bringing more well-known poets to Pensacola. In fact, just last week, he's kind of jet-lagged from having to do all this work. Not literally jet-lagged, but he's tired. But he brought in the renowned American poet Alice Notley for an event, really a 2-day event, a workshop and then a reading at Pensacola State College where he teaches English. Jamie's involvement in poetry and enthusiasm for it was inspiring to me in our short time together, just a week together, but we were able to talk several times, and it really made an impact on me personally. But there's something more about Jamie than that. He is what I would call a man of the people. He may not agree with that, but I think he is. He went off to New York City to get his Master of Fine Arts in creative writing, but then he came back home. He came back to Pensacola, little old Pensacola, and he works there. He began to work to draw attention to poetry. and its importance. And his fervor in that respect sparked an idea in me. If Pensacola could have a poetry scene, then why can't Marianna have one too? Yes, poetry is important. We live in a frenetic era, rampant with bombast, one-liners, sound bites, interruption, and speaking before thinking on all sides. It's everywhere. And that's why poetry is so important. Poetry is compact. There's a lot in a little space, yes. But poetry takes time, and that's the beauty of it. Time to think about what it is that you're trying to communicate. Time to choose the most meaningful words. Time to put those words in just the right order on the page. Time to let the silence of the white space on the page do its work too. Time to silently linger over the outcome. Time to let it sit and rest for a while, and then time to come back to it. We need poetry in our day. This summer, as I expressed my doubts to Jamie about my own pursuit of writing poetry, there are a lot of poets out there, both good and bad. I asked him the question, does the world really need another poet? Does the world really need another poet? Talking about myself. And I'll never forget his answer to me. And he doesn't remember what he said, but he said, I probably said that. He did say it. Emphatically and a little incredulously, he answered, yes, yes. So that's why we're here tonight. Because poetry is important, and the world, including Marianna, needs another poet. So everyone, please welcome our speaker tonight, Jamie Jones.
Thank you. Let me turn on my timer so I don't talk too long. Hello, everybody. Thank you. Thank you, Kurt. Thank you for that amazing introduction. I was kind of sweating it out there when you said you were about to quote me. I'm like, okay, maybe I did, maybe I didn't. It depends on what's going to come out of his mouth. So, yeah, I would say that. I would say that today. I would say that whenever. Of course, the world needs more poets. You can't have too many poets. Lord knows there's enough words, enough verbiage going on in the world, from TV, radio, social media. In fact, the voices don't stop unless we make an effort to stop them. And I think we can get quite disconnected from ourselves by being bombarded by all the incoming distractions. So I think poetry is the real news, Poetry is the real news of the day because it's a chance for everyone to be authentic, and we're in short supply of that. I think for a better civilization. I brought Virgil's Aeneid with me tonight. It's one of my favorite books, and those of you that are into classical studies, if I get this wrong, just humor me. When Virgil's father Anchises has passed away, and Aeneas' father, his father Anchises has passed away, and he goes into the underworld, and Aeneas is able to go into the underworld, and he sees Anchises under there, and Anchises, his dad, is showing him around. He said, "These are the great warriors of our time. And these are this people over here. These are the farmers. And then there's this group over here with laurel around their heads. It's the traditional sign of poets. Sorry, I didn't bring mine, but laurel." And he said, "And these are our poets who made life more civilized with their newfound art." And I get chills when I say that. I realize civilized is a loaded word, but I still hold true to it. So here's to being civilized. I'm very happy to be here tonight, and I'm happy to read with you all. It's good to see a group of poets. It's good to see what a setup. What a place. This is a great space. I realize many of you, maybe all of you, are required to be here. I hope it's not a bummer. I would like to think it's because of me. You said, "Oh, that guy, Jamie Jones, is coming here." But I hope it's meaningful for you. So when Kurt asked me to come, he originally asked me to give a poetry reading, and I said, sure, no problem. And then a few weeks ago, he changed it to lecture/poetry reading. And they said, but don't be scared by the lecture thing, you know. And I'm only a little bit scared of the lecture thing. So I thought, you know, I kind of like the idea of talking around the poems, reading a few poems, talking a little bit, and telling you a little bit about myself. I'll open up with a couple of poems. It is April, after all. And it's Poetry Month, but it's also the month of my birth. I was born on April 17th in 1964. And I love April. I love Easter. I love just the month. I love spring, you know. So I've started collecting a lot of poems I've written every April. One day it might be a book called April Fool. And this is called April Fool. 1. Born in surrounding sound of rain, arrived by car to awaiting siblings, sunlight, wrapped in cotton blankets, rolled about on bed sheets, furniture, carpet, floorboards, grass, and sand, watched over by adoring eyes, sister, brother, mother, father. First woods, the lot between our house and the neighbor's house. First trail pulling me in like a magnet into April, shimmering word of water and light. 2. I knew we should not be in the neighbor's backyard. I knew we shouldn't have snuck in through the gate. I knew I shouldn't get closer to the edge of the fish pond when my buddy Ray encouraged me to in order to catch that big goldfish, which I knew should be left alone. Just what did we think we were going to do with it? But I did it anyway, slipped on the green algae, fell in, got caught, and had to shamefully face my parents in wet clothes. 3. Smell of water on a sweltering day, silver chain link fence, red brick side of the house, sand, grasses, and azaleas repel heat back into itself in solid waves more like a wall. 2 streams of water jet far into a clear sky from blowholes atop the head of a red well sprinkler. Showered in sunlight, the streams and droplets sparkle, illuminate on my tanned skin and all around me as I jump and dance about, through and within them. In nothing but my red bathing suit covered in little fish, hot sand sticking to my bare feet. I am no fish, but feel near to them now. So these April poems, I decided to try to write about memories that I have, my earliest memories, and not put the pressure on myself to get it all factually right, but to get to the essence of my memory of that feeling of being a kid. Currency of leaves. I remember the green mimosa leaves and how they felt good to touch, finger-like strips of material my mom might use to make clothes. I remember one afternoon I decided to pick these leaves off the tree in the front yard and place them in a round peach basket. With no sense of deviance whatsoever, this felt like a mission to me, a calling perhaps, my purpose to strip this tree of its leaves. I remember the feeling as though the leaves were like money somehow, but better than money because I didn't yet know what money was. This was my first collection of anything, a gathering of beautiful leaves that felt like tiny cloth fingers, green and delicate. I was happy with this job, collector of a new currency, only I understood. I don't remember who stopped me when the basket was roughly half full, and I only vaguely remember that they were angry and didn't share my enthusiasm for my labor. I just remember feeling rich, proud, and connected to these leaves in a way that made me smile. So, poetry is a currency. I'd say it's a counter-currency. You can pretend to write poems. In fact, I tell my students, sometimes because they have a lot of pressure. They're nervous about writing. I say, okay, these aren't going to be real poems. These are going to be fake poems. And I just want you to write these pretend poems. They're like, oh, okay. And then they get to it, and they write, and they let it go. The only way you can really make that happen is to be honest with yourself, And only each of us, we're the only ones who know that, whether we're being honest or not. And you might fool people for a while if you're not really being honest and writing, but it's not going to last too long. I mean, you've got to have that sincerity, and you've got to have that authenticity. I wasn't always a poet. For probably the first 12 years of public school, I was a scared kid and a really troubled student, barely making it through school. Early on, I just couldn't pay attention in the way that everybody was telling me I should. I would rather be looking out the window at the clouds or the squirrels or the birds instead of making notes or paying attention. And in retrospect, it was probably just ADD, because most of us do have some form of that, which is not really a problem. But at the time, they would put us in these, what were called learning disability classes. And they lumped a lot of people in those classes together. There were some people with some severe disabilities, some very serious disabilities. And then there were people like me who were just kind of spacey and couldn't really focus. And we were all put in there together. It was called learning disabilities. And I'm telling you, there was such a stigma to going to those classes. I would sneak to them because, you were dumb if you went to those classes. That's kind of how we felt as kids. And that really did a number on my self-esteem, on my idea of myself. And so immediately, I don't know if that alone did it, but I just figured that I wasn't made for school. And I really gave up trying. And I'm not sure how I passed every year, to be honest with you. I was frightened of school. I was scared of school. And when teachers would show me, let's just stick to poems, for example, but any subject, but let's just say poems. When teachers would show me poems, I would have impressions. I would have a feeling about that, but what the teacher was saying was not what I was feeling, so I just figured I'm wrong. They're the expert. They're right. And it took me a long time to get past that. It really did. To learn that, no, I mean, if I was to show each of you, I don't know how many there are, maybe 60, 70 people in here tonight. If I gave you one poem, really there's going to be that many different poems from the way each of us read that poem, And you have to trust your sensibility. You have to trust, even if you're confused. I always tell my students, bring your confusion in here too, and trust your confusion. You're confused for a reason, so we can't back away from it, Took me a long time to get there. I took a creative writing class in 11th grade, and I enjoyed that. And I was starting to get a little more serious about school at that time. But I didn't really stay with it, and it wasn't until, I graduated in 1983 from high school and went straight to what was then Pensacola Junior College, which is where I teach now, which is Pensacola State College. And I just went there because, my parents said this is what you should do. They were paying for it. It's right. Can anybody relate to that? It's what your parents say. I mean, it's right. It's what you're supposed to do. I didn't want to do it. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a kid, for goodness sakes. And I just proceeded to flunk out. I just proceeded to skip class and, play around. I was a skateboarder from the age, I'm leaving this out, this is a rather important fact, from around the age of 6. I started skateboarding, and I got very good at it very quickly, and thank goodness for that, because it was the one thing that I was good at. I always say it was my first poetry, and I won a lot of competitions. I even competed, in the state, and I would always choke at the pro-ams. I won a lot of local contests. I would get in the pro-ams and skate with the Rodney Mullins and people like that, and I would blow it because I would just choke. But that was my first poetry. That was the first thing that I did that was really good, that I felt good. I mean, I did it all the time. I just skated. It kept me out of a lot of trouble. It kept me focused on something that was healthy. Well, falling on pavement's not real healthy. It's not forgiving. But considering a lot of routes I could have taken. But around the age of 18, I read my first novel. It blows my mind that I could have made it through the public school system without reading a novel, but I did. I'm proof of that. But I read The Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac, known as being part of the Beat generation, if you look in your literature book. I didn't know there was a Beat generation. I didn't know this even existed, didn't care. But this book, something about it really opened me up and gave me permission to attempt to be a poet. It made me want to be a poet. It made me believe that if I could put my own words to the page, that was enough. And as long as I was being honest, I equated this sincerity with quality poetry. It doesn't always work that way. It doesn't mean the poem's going to be great, although that's a very subjective statement. But without sincerity, you're lost. The poem's not going to go very far. But it was around that time I started trusting myself with writing. In the meantime, I would skip English class at Pensacola Junior College and go sit in my Volkswagen Beetle and read Jack Kerouac. And at the time, I could only find 3 novels in that town, On the Road and Desolation Angels. And I read those. And then I ordered a biography that was 1,000 pages on him. I had never, a book that was 1,000 pages, me reading that, I devoured it. I became obsessed with this guy and his writing habits and his connection to his emotions, his connections to his spirituality.
Sorry.
That's all right. I'm just curious. I just want to know what's behind me. Yeah. If an angel or something would have come up, I would have gone, this is really weird. Anyway, but, the connection to that, and I immediately loved it, I started writing every day. My GPA was going down. I was just failing out of school. I'd quit school, and it's kind of a long story, but, I went into the Merchant Marines briefly, and I was out at sea for like 80 days. I can't believe I did this. It seems like a dream, as I tell you, I really did. And after about 15 days, I realized this is not my calling. This is not what I should be doing, but now I'm stuck on this ship for a while. And I kept a journal, and I read, and I've always been able to make friends, so I made a lot of friends. And, when you're out at sea without seeing land for like 80 days, it's like being in outer space. I mean, you are in outer space. You're just horizon to horizon, and it's quite amazing. When I got back, I'd saved up all this money. I wasn't spending it. It was going home. And I went to Europe and backpacked around Europe and just kind of bummed around, did this job, did that job. And I fell in love in Wales, in the town Dylan Thomas is from, actually, the poet Dylan Thomas, Swansea, Wales. And that was that, that was her name was Anne. That's the mother of my children. We would soon get married. She would move here. And I had to get a job then. I had kids. I had a family. So I worked a series of jobs all this time, from the time 17 onward. And then around the age of 30, the whole time writing, I started organizing poetry readings in Pensacola because there weren't any. And I was reading about them. I was like, man, this would be cool. I want to see this happen, an attempt to connect. I started several of those, and I just wanted to make it happen. I wanted to explore my art. I kept writing. I would send off to literary journals and get rejection after rejection after rejection. And I remember the first time I got published in a journal, I was so happy. I was so happy. It would have been great if I got paid, but I didn't need to get paid. I didn't need to get paid. I'm telling you, it was worth more. It was worth more. It was a feeling of like, wow. And I was just reading and writing were all I wanted to do. But and during this whole time, raising a family, I have 3 daughters. They're grown. I have 4 grandsons. It's a long story, but this is where it all started. And so during this time of raising a family, having to have insurance, having to pay bills, I just did a series of blue-collar jobs. I worked in warehouses. I drove trucks. And then the final thing I ended up doing before I was a teacher, I ended up working in a print shop. I ran a printing press, which, if you have a sympathetic boss, it's a great place to work if you're a poet who wants to make his own chapbooks, And so I was able to start a journal, like a zine, and did my own journal. And I would write to my heroes, my favorite poets, I didn't know them from Adam. I knew their books. I'd write to them. I'd write to their publisher. And I'd ask for poems. I'd tell them what I thought of their work. I wouldn't get much of a response sometimes, but sometimes some of them would write back and send me poems. And my journal kind of got a reputation. It's called Brown Box. I was making a journal called Brown Box. Very simple. But I did this for a while, but I was working these jobs all the time, and work and pleasure. Work and happiness, those two words did not go in the same sentence for me. I did not like my day job. I just knew that I had to have a job. I've always been able to have a job. I didn't like it. I didn't think you're supposed to. I didn't think it was possible that you could like your job. But after a while, that really wore thin, and I went back to school in 2000 no, I don't know, when was it? No, I was 37. Let's put it that way. At 37, I went back to school. By this point, I had taken a class here and a class there part-time, and I'd skip a few semesters and take one at night, then take this. So after 19 years of pursuing my 2-year AA degree, I got it. Yeah. But with a goal at that point, and I was paying for it. There was no mom and dad paying for it at this point. But it's like I quit a full-time job to go back to school full-time thinking, all right, I can do this if I stay focused. And I finally decided to major in English. I never wanted to major in that because I loved it too much. So, well, I don't want to go study it in academia. I'm doing it. I'm living it. But I didn't know what else to do. And I had to align my life, my what I love to do. I just hoped and prayed that it would be aligned with my passion, my livelihood to be aligned with my passion. That was my goal. I didn't know where it would take me. I didn't want to be a teacher. I never planned on being a teacher. But what else do you do? I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with an English degree. Sorry, English teachers, I know. There's a lot we don't want to tell our students that. I get it. But as soon as I got that degree, I went to PJC at the time, then UWF, University of West Florida, 4-year university. I finished my bachelor's in English. I had to get a job. So I went, I started applying in schools, the public school district. And after about 25 interviews, I was about to give up. I finally got one teaching middle school. That's the scariest job I've ever attempted to do in my life. At this point, I'd been published quite a bit too. The publications were starting to happen. I was getting published. But let me tell you something. That doesn't make you a good teacher. That doesn't qualify you to teach. So I was the whole year I felt like a fraud. I thought, oh my God, these kids are going to just know I'm a fraud. I don't know what a dangling participle is. I really don't know. I would go home and anything we would study, anything I'd be covering, I would study it just so much. And that's how I learned grammar. I knew what it looked like. I just didn't know. I could write. I just couldn't identify, so to teach it. But here's what happened. And I'll read some more poems. Shut up. That job, it overwhelmed me. I was exhausted. I was feeling that, I'm 7th grade. 7th grade was my worst year as a kid. And where do I get hired? 7th grade. It's like, I'm back. I can't. So it's like, my mother, she passed away like a year later. She lived to see me do this. And she was very proud. She had Alzheimer's in their last years. But she was very cognitive when I got this job. So proud. And she laughed, and she just thought it was the funniest thing. She was proud. She said, you teaching 7th grade? I can't tell you how much time I spent in the dean's office in 7th grade. And so I said, yeah, Mom, it's proof that karmic retribution is real. It's a real thing. What goes around comes around. Anyway, I'll read a poem or two. How am I doing on time, Kurt? A few more? It's a long story, but the point is, you guys, I've pursued, it's gone on. I've had the good fortune to have met so many of my heroes, people who I started publishing and just writing to. I knew them from their books first. I've had many things like that happen, and I can't make it up. I could not have made up these stories, And it was by choosing to follow what I love. And, to tell your parents, well, I want to be a poet. That's kind of scary for a lot of parents to hear that. It's like, well, is that going to mean you're going to get out of the house? How are you going to be able to pay the bills? Because if you're into poetry for money or the ego, it's not going to sustain you too long. But it was what I loved, and I feel it's led to so many great things in my life. This is a poem called Ghost Envelopes in Winter. I organized this community event where I invited like 20, 25 different poets, several of my colleagues at Pensacola State, and I made some rules. I said, oh, it was at an art opening downtown, and it was kind of a really hokey title. It was on nature photography and nature installations. It was called Thoroughly Natural. Yeah. But they asked me if I would do this thing and create do some writing event. They said poetry reading. I created an assignment for everybody that I sent an invitation to. And the deal was you had to read Henry David Thoreau for something like 5-10 minutes a day and take notes. And you had to look outside by a window or whatever and take notes. Do that for like 5 days, and then you had to make a poem from your notes. No older poems. This had to be created for the event. And we created an anthology, and it was really, really great. And this was mine. And I start out with a quote from his journals from Winter. I do not talk to any intellect of nature, but am presuming an infinite heart somewhere into which I play. Sunlight and shadow move across the pages, December 21st, 1853, and December 21st, 1851. Right to left, headed north, this sunlight is new again after all these years. And after all these years, my feet are still cold, and the lowly oak branches push about, shimmer, and glow. Sunlight on the phrase harp-like, and a sudden swoosh of wind. I do not talk of intellect, I do not talk of rapture, but meander about the room with an infinite heart of this nature. Sun on the nape of my neck, knuckle shadows pass over these words as I write them, which means that the sunlight is pouring in from the south, not yet directly above the window or roof. Proof that it must be nearing noon. So some poems like that almost make sense, make a certain kind of sense. If you were to dig, you could find meaning. I don't always try to make poems mean something. When you feel it, you know it. It's going to mean something. But I also like to play. I like to play with poems. I like to play with language. This is I'm reading from a manuscript that I hope to have published soon. It's called I Used to Be Dishonest Tonight. You can laugh. It's funny. It's a funny title. I like it because it confuses me every time I say it in a way that I think is healthy. I'm perplexed. I like being perplexed. It's boring if I know what everything is, you know? So here's some of these playful poems, Once. Oh, and this involves a dream, too. I keep a dream journal, and dream material comes into my poems all the time. It's your experience, too, just like waking life. Once, in a little thunder drum, in a little apple shower, in a sparrow whip, in a Harry Matthews book, in a Houdini straitjacket. No poem, gone, less a bridge, more a song. Dreamed a sky raining apples, saw Houdini standing alone. If I can't write, I'll read. If I can't read, I'll sing. If I can't sing, I'll do nothing, somewhere, and hope to find you there. I can feel a late heart arriving on time. I can feel bridges implode into rose bushes, into oiled beaches, into crystalline skies, blue, piercing, diamond-edged. I can feel bird mornings, monkey grass, dewdrops, electric heat, fog lifting, sparrow palms. I can feel the poem writing itself. So I'm going to read a poem that I've never read before. This one does make sense, and I hope I can read it. It's a kind of emotional poem. I hope it's not a downer, but it's meaningful to me. It's called Somewhere. In those last hours before dawn, a mother at the bedside of her dying husband with their 2 sons, exhausted, emotionally and physically drained, blurry in the swirl of the weight. At a certain point, her speaking changes, becoming more clear, awake, and lighter. Subtle at first, her words ease into this new energy, and she talks, and talks, recollecting the beginning of their life together, how they met, stories of first impressions, first charms. She speaks in soft tones, hushed but clear, more than a whisper. She talks herself past crying, past worry, past exhaustion and helplessness. Each word seems to bring relief, energizing the next, increasing the momentum of her narrative. It becomes something almost like joy. Her soft words seem to smile. She loves him so. As his breaths become further apart, slower and slower, she talks more and more, recalling something about a boat docked at a pier. He holds it for her to get on, or it starts to pull away, or maybe she's halfway on, one leg on the dock, one on the boat. He takes her tiny hand in his so she won't fall, and it's all in the touch. She takes comfort in his touch, their touch, as he lays dying in the hospital bed. Her sons are listening as best they can, falling in and out of sleep, wiped out past reason and logic, holding his hands at intervals, stroking his forehead. And her speech becomes something else, and daylight is becoming visible through the windows, and they are getting on a boat. She loves him so. He is holding the boat for her. She almost misses it. He takes her hand. Her talking propels past exhaustion. Her sons say very little, but listen in and out of the weave. Something is happening. The stream of her soft, steady words, a mother's words, words of a wife, a love, her words of love for him. They are getting on a boat, and the sun is coming up. She is somewhere else, akin to joy. I don't believe it. Her speech is the rhythm of water, a sound, an intercoastal waterway of heart and light. She is losing the love of her life. She is gaining the love of her life. Her speech is a glowing song, a prayer, a quiet hymn of mourning. She is speaking in intercoastal tones just before the sun. Her sons are present, hanging on to her every word. Their father is dying, and the world is beautiful. And their mother laughs lightly and speaks with an energy beyond their understanding, beyond the literal setting, frigid hospital room, beeping IV, and their father's last breaths. She speaks and speaks and speaks like a boat motoring its way through, like a wife before God, a mother holding the world together. Her calm, smiling words are golden. She loves him so. He takes her tiny hand in his and helps her onto the boat. Thank you. You know, I needed an obnoxious interruption in the middle of that. I think that might have helped me through. It is about my father's death. And, you know, I wrote that in last April. I don't know why I wrote it. I had just remembered that, you know. And I remember how grateful I was to be with my father when he died. And, I mean, what a blessing, I thought, you know. What a great thing. I wouldn't have missed it, as sad as it was. I wanted to be present. But I remember my brother and I were just so wiped out. And Mom just like, you know, partly delirium maybe too, but she just opened up. And we heard these stories that we'd never heard. It was like, wow. But the boat, you know. So how about I read maybe one more? Can I read one more? And then something lighthearted after that. It's funny, you know. All right, we'll do this. I think you've heard this one, Kurt. Yeah, maybe you've heard this one. This is called Inner Altitude. You could say the light is on. You could say, speak like a light, or say, your mom is a light bulb, or that your mom dresses you like a light bulb. Light bulbs are funny, and mothers often keep them stored as needed, or at least mine did. She would buy them from phone solicitors with some sort of disability services organization. It made her feel good to do this, and it enabled her to always have light bulbs on hand. You could say the church bell is ringing. You could say that the dog barks like a church bell, but that would be kind of silly, though almost true. Or you could just tell it like it is and say that when the bell rings while walking the dog, you pause physically, mentally, and just breathe until it stops, which is true. You do this. You stop by choice. The dog stops because she's with you, though she doesn't seem to mind. She just waits patiently until the walk resumes, happy to be out. You could say that she dreams of swimming in the sound of a church bell, but you have no way of knowing that for sure. But to think about that sound now, how it's a part of your daily walks, connects you and the dog, the streets, houses, power lines, feral roosters, cats, sunsets, and stars, together in a way that seems like a really good dream. You could say the single blue painted oak leaf by the walk in the front yard is a charm, and that the white feather referred to on the card is your fortune, but not everyone would believe you. And why should they? But why wouldn't they? Because you sound too new age and flaky. But that doesn't really matter to you, because you know what you know, and you can't make people do or think anything they're not ready for. You could say you can lead a person to a light bulb, but you can't make her drink. And that would be interesting and true and funny. You could say that yesterday you wrote a note that said empty by 5-4. And then today came in and saw it on the desk where you left it. This is true. The note refers to what you told the contractor who's about to renovate your home. But today is your 54th birthday, and you read it as empty by 54. And smile. This feels good and authentic, empty in the Buddhist sense, as in golden, as in enlightened. You could say that today, at 54, you are finally enlightened. That's a nice thought, and one worth hanging on to, at least for today. Hey, thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. I look forward to hearing you guys read. Yeah.
That was great. Thank you so much, Jamie. Well, we want to move on to our local poets here, and the way that this is going to work is we're going to go with minimal introductions. Robert Frost was asked to explain a poem one time, and he said, "What do you want me to do? Say it over again in worser English?" So we're going to let the poetry speak for itself, and you know, if you need a tiny "this is about my something," that's okay, but just get right into it. So these first 5 students that are poets anyway that are going to speak are students. I put them first because I knew I could make them do this. They are my students right now. They're taking my Shakespeare class for English education majors. And so, well, I say it like I made them do it. They really were very enthusiastic about reading, and I'm thankful for them. So we'll start with them: Melody, Randy, Zayla, Brianna, and then Josh. And then I'll come back up after you guys. So, Melody?
More slanted than this. I think it's funny that Mr. McKinnis asked me to go first because like 70% of my life is introduction. She's like, I want you to set a good example. And I'm like, I'm not a good example. But my name is Melody Holt, and this is my poem, If It Were a Person. If it were a person, it wouldn't look like him. It'd be black with black edges and carved out from within. If it were a person, it wouldn't take long strides. It would walk at its leisure. It wouldn't trod, it would glide. If it were a person, it would speak in soft tongues, with round words edged as weapons, and sharp phrases meant to numb. If it were a person, it would hang like a cloak out of racks made of people with a rancidity like smoke. If it were a person, it would feed on your space, with no hint of apology and no pretense of grace. If it were a person, it would never be washed. It would reek of those fears, it'd be grimed with those thoughts. If it were a person, it would take 2 to fight, or an army, perhaps, with mob fires set alight. If it were a person, it would stumble at proof. It would crumble near kindness. It would falter at truth. If it were a person, it would burn in the light. It would crave for the darkness. It would starve until night. If it were a person, it would quake at your heart, at the strength that was placed there to unravel its parts. If it were a person, it would be all alone, with no Sams there to guide it, and no place to call home. If it were a person, it would die a slow death. It would curl in its ashes. It would hide from love's deaths. If it were a person, you would beat it each day and move on to tomorrow to fight it a new way. If it were a person, I would tell it goodbye. I don't need to see you. I'm done asking why. I don't wish to see you. I don't wish to listen. If it were a person, I'd bury it in prison. Can you guys see me? So I have two. My first one is called Fortress. So, in this castle of my own that I have crafted out of stone, with its walls so strong and high that it reaches past the sky, in a place so far and deep that not a sound, no, not a peep, could ever reach the ears of those who try to linger near, with its many weathered guards whose sturdy faces have been marred by battles that they fight that rage for years, both day and night, against those who seek to find what my fortress shields and hides, and take its treasure as their own, though what it is cannot be known. For in this castle of my own that was not built by flesh or bone, that human eyes have never seen, where no tongue dares to call me queen, there sits a secret on the throne that's meant for me and me alone. And in the darkness of this cage, my secret trembles there, afraid. So my next one doesn't really have a title, so we decided to go with the first line. The first line is, the bed was made. The bed was made, and the clothes were neat in their drawers, and the hangers were all turned the same way. The scarves that hung on the little rack behind the door were aligned so that none hung with one side longer than the other. The bed skirt brushed the air exactly where it was supposed to, and the decorative pillows made the fresh, straight bed look beautiful. She stood in the center of the room and turned, taking everything in with her eyes and storing it away somewhere where her heart would not find it. She saw the perfectly closed drawers and the hangers all in a row, and remembered a morning when she rushed to get ready and the sound the light plastic made when it hit the carpet. She saw the long mirror on the back of the door, and she remembered how she had stood in front of it and smiled a smile that only a woman in love possesses. Her eyes wandered over the immaculate floor, and she took note of just how spotless it truly was. He walked through the door and kissed her cheek. He carefully moved the decorative pillows to the floor, and he crawled into the bed without disturbing the covers. She looked at him and saw the contentment in his eyes, and she knew that he did not remember. The perfect cheeks wrinkled under her weight as she lay down beside him. Another kiss, a quick, sweet word. His arm draped over her gently, as it had done every night since their marriage, and she remembered a time when her side had held up love, not just tradition. She caught sight of herself and her sleeping man in the long mirror and looked away from the pain. Her eyes settled on the empty place where she had once threw her clothes without a care whenever the day was done. He did not know it, but that messy floor had been so much more than just something to be cleaned. It had been comfortable. It branded a time when she was not something to be hidden while within the walls of their home, when exposing herself, body and soul, was not done in secret. It marked a moment in time when her love for him and his love for her, for one alone is never enough, was greater than her hate for herself. Dirty clothes on the floor are not dirty clothes on the floor, and they never were. They are peace and love, joy and serenity, passion and laughter, and everything good that is so easy to get caught up in that no time can be found to put the dirty clothes in the right spot. She closed her eyes against the blindingly barren floor. She listened to him breathe, felt his arms around her, and thought he might as well be on the other side of the universe. Sleep came and took her back, and she buried the dream memories deep when she awoke, because memories were hard, but hope is even harder, and dreams come too close to hope to be left to roam around freely.
She washed her face and brushed her hair. She packed her lunch and tied her shoes. And when she was ready to leave for the day, she glanced around to make sure that nothing was out of place. And the clothes were tucked tight in their drawers. And the hangers were all stuffed the same way. The many scarves that smothered the burdened little rack, and the bed skirt reached for a floor that it would never touch. And the bed was made.
My name's Zayla, and my poem is called I Want You to Know. I hope you like it. When I had you, the world was mine. You saw me, untamed, joyous, free, a fierce, solitary rose. Maybe you thought I was sweet, silly boy. Roses have thorns, and nothing good in life comes easy. But you don't give up when it gets tough, and you don't get to take back what you gave. You wanted the beauteous rose, but not her thorns. I gave you all that I could, thought you could be my nightingale, but you were not willing to navigate the perilous seas that led to my heart. So I will continue to grow alone. I've never needed anyone, but I wanted you badly enough that I felt the need for you. But now, the roots that were attached to you will be broken. This rose will not die, but grow in the absence of you. I will flourish, bloom, blossom, and you will not steal my inner beauty. You will have no part of me to claim as a prize, for you did not tame me. It is I who have won. You will look for me inside of every person you meet, and I will not be found. With time, you will realize your mistake, but by then, I will already be gone. The world is mine once again.
So I've got a couple pieces. The first one I'm called Untitled. Fire burning down my back, ice prickling from my toes. Breathe in, breathe out. Every nerve in my body is shaking.
What do you want to do? Closer to her? Okay.
Can we start over? Okay. Fire burning down my back, ice prickling from my toes. Breathe in, breathe out. Every nerve in my body is shrieking. Take it one day at a time. Feels like never. What was I saying? Clouds fog my brain. My bed beckons me. Moving helps. My body screams, "You're crazy." I'm moving through molasses. Every cell is on fire. You're young, you'll be fine. I feel like I've done hard labor for decades. I'm 20, but my body thinks it's 80. I'm exhausted, body overused. There's so much still to do. My body flushes, my head spins. I feel like I'm forgetting something. My vision shakes, I'm falling. My heart races, my head pounds. The room keeps getting warmer, the world closes in, my vision darkens. I'm 20, but my body thinks it's 80. All right. Okay, the next one's called Internal Warfare. Tiny nerves fire like soldiers armed with cannons. Ready, aim, fire. An eternal battle raging within me. Man down. The numbness spreads, creeping down the battlefield. A merciless fog. Like a fine layer of dust, the clouds coat my brain while the battle rages on. And my last one is called The Wind. Cool zephyrs through sunny meadows, lifting butterfly wings, stirring the branches, whispering secrets, ancient and primal, growling and screaming through the night, unpredictable, unstoppable, a force of nature. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Josh Smith. first poem is a short commentary on society. The tattooed man no longer has a job, even in a circus. The world wanted to be unique, but copied him. The tattooed man started a trend and ended his life. This next poem is about my father. It's called My Father Repetition. Repetition is my father. He teaches me, he clarifies for me, he verifies for me, he inspires me. We should all aspire to be greater than our fathers. I don't want to be like my father, repetition, and that's why I hate repeating myself. And this last poem speaks for itself. It's called I Am Nothing. God placed my wife in my life. Without her, I wouldn't be the man I am today. We fought through all these negative feelings I hold. She made me fight them face to face. She humbled me when I was weak or wrong. She raised me up when I fell or stood strong. They say happy wife, happy life. I say I'm happy because of my wife. So why would I not do everything I could to return the favor? People proclaim their love for their children more so than their spouse. I can't do that. I love my child, just not as much as my wife. In doing so, I believe we have built a strong house. She's seen me cry. She's brought out the best of me, and she helps fight off the worst in me. I know my wife, and I know that she knows these things. The reason I wrote this, only to openly declare my feelings. I could go on, but one sentence says it all. Without my wife, I am nothing.
Thank you. Thank you all. Our next three poets, Kara, Chris, and Carolyn, are also students of mine in my English 1102 class, and they were tasked at the beginning of this semester with writing a poem, an original composition, and they had a choice to either write a villanelle, a sonnet, or just write a regular poem for a B. But these folks and others went for the gold, and I think they did a really good job. Kara is first. Hers is called "The Works of God Before Our Eyes Unfold," and it is a villanelle. That's a really hard kind of poem to write. It's 19 lines. It's got this ABA basically rhyme scheme that has a repeating line every other stanza. It's an iambic pentameter, and so Kara would. How many times did you bring this to me? Probably like 5-6 times, and we would go over it and fix it and figure it out, but she stuck with it and did a great job. Chris wrote a great narrative sonnet, and Carolyn is my daughter, so I'm making her be here, and she wrote a poem called "The Pen." It's a sonnet as well, so I'm going to invite them all, the three of those, to come up in order now. Kara, come on.
Hi, I'm Kara. Hi, I'm Kara. Okay. My poem is titled "The Works of God Before Our Eyes Unfold." The works of God before our eyes unfold, so not to question, doubt, or else deny. Majestic beauty for all to behold. A sunset's glorious red, scarlet, and gold. A masterpiece against a canvas sky. The works of God before our eyes unfold. The snowy mountain peaks, the winter's cold, or ocean waves that crash against the shore. Majestic beauty for all to behold. The song of a nightingale, divine and bold, a mighty melody to those who hear. The works of God before our eyes unfold. A newborn babe, a mother's gift to hold. Created life, a stunning wonderment. Majestic beauty for all to behold. My Lord, my Savior, to all I have told, He brings salvation, beauty to the world. The works of God before our eyes unfold, majestic beauty for all to behold.
Just give me a second to pull it up. All right. Mine is called A Night to Remember. I've seen a thing most terrible tonight. The sight has left my mind in fearful awe. I first beheld the beast in early night, peering into my weak and ravaged caw. Those sickly green eyes imbued me in pale light. Its notched skin a churning, black and void. Its body displayed a visible might, its rippling shadows of my will destroyed. I tried to flee from it, but I froze. It began to trudge towards my form. A dark cloud came over, like a swift storm. I grasped the last bits of my courage, offered a dissolution of marriage.
My poem is called The Pen. A weapon of vast power squelched with pride by those whose tongues dictate a lofty snare. O artist, pray do listen and abide to actions of those who had dared to dare, to bring out of the shadows and hot brine an inky bird, and men cast off to sea, and dreamers brought a girl with roll divine, reluctant thieves who much preferred tea. The love of youth and death of treacheries, and witches speaking truth and meeting jaws. A thief who ran in search of lasting peace, from eyes who search for pain to fulfill laws. To scratch the words of madmen lost, yet great. Inside an ink-stained hand it lies in wait.
Our next two poets, Ashley and Emily, are friends, and they are writers outside of all of this and have done their own writings and are pretty accomplished in that. And so I invite them to come now and read their poems. Come on, Ashley.
Okay, so it occurred to me at like 3:45 today that I don't like reading out loud. But anyway, so I'm a little bit nervous. You have to bear with me. This poem, all I'm really going to say about it is I wrote it last summer, and it's called Rhythms. Knit, pearl, stitch by stitch, row by row, piece by piece, there's a rhythm to it. As I sit here eating an omelet and drinking coffee on my lunch hour, I wish I was knitting, but my heart so often longs for the quieter practices. But as I sit in this little diner, nothing is quiet. People chat and utensils scrape against plates. The cook's spatula clangs against the grill. The diner's loud, but the spirit is quiet. That's because it's Tuesday in a small town. There's a little old man seated on the other side of the diner drinking a cup of coffee. He's always there on my lunch hour, always drinking a cup of coffee, always at that table. Rhythms. I like rhythms. When I was a freshman in college, I had an 8 o'clock class. This 8 o'clock class put me at the same red light between 7:42 and 7:45 every morning. And nearly every morning as I sat at that red light, the same old blue pickup with the same yellow lab in the back would always also pull up at that red light. After the first few times, I started keeping a tally on a post-it note of how many days in a row we met. 11. On day 12, I was running late and missed them. But on day 13, we met again. Rhythms. The waitress refills my coffee. I have to go back to the courthouse soon. My mind wanders to the church lady, as I like to call her. Every Tuesday morning, she walks around the courthouse in her church robes quoting scripture. She always has her Bible with her, but I've never seen her open it. She doesn't have to. Having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof, she chants. Rhythms. I do so love these rhythms of small-town life. They wrap around my heart like a knitted shawl. Knit, pearl, stitch by stitch, moment by moment, row by row, day by day. Years go by, rhythms.
I like that I got called accomplished. That's new. My poem's called Gardeners. My doubt, an overzealous gardener trims the shyly reaching shoots of love. I can't be sure of people. They follow their whims, then ask forgiveness. Waiting for the plant to prove a blossom gives time to defile the strictly kept plot. Trust my fence and want for nothing but new flowers. You, meanwhile, will offer scarred but open palms and smile.
Well, our next poet is Daisy White, and she is the most enthusiastic poet here tonight. She showed up at like 5 o'clock ready. And so, are you ready now, Daisy? Where are you? Are you ready? All right, come on. Yeah, come on.
Okay, so I showed up at 5, obviously, because I'm a highly nervous person, and I write poetry because it's my favorite way to vent and also convert my thoughts into graspable, if that's a real word, concepts, even though sometimes they're kind of confusing, but to me it makes sense. So I wrote this actually the other day because I thought about how sometimes, people with blue eyes, sometimes when they cry, it's like their tears in their eyes kind of morph into one thing. And it's called Crystals. Crystal clear blues were the ones. I remember how much they weren't mine. It's almost as if the lake reveals a true appearance, but no, the lake isn't revealing, only a reflection. Down like glistening pigment were the words like tragedies from another mother, promises and creeds, recited from the flower which stem from the seed. It isn't much to me. Gifts are gifts though, right? Those crystals, I warn their existence. Stop draining the pigment. The colors mix into a mess, but it's beautiful. You're still beautiful. Dark sea, depths into more than the land. Although some try to glide across for freedom, danger awaits. But isn't it always awaiting? Always gliding. Isn't it sweet? It isn't much to me. It means something. The way you turn things around. Warnings, words, and worries aren't a thing to boats. But you are the raindrops. The forming water, glistening like pigment. Gray, strong, free. Like mist and fog and vapor, so soft. Don't fret. Be flowing.
Well, our next to last poet is David Cobb. You can come on up, David. David was nervous tonight, and I said, David, you've jumped out of airplanes. So he's got this. Come on, Dave.
It's a whole lot easier than a C-130. Mr. Jones, thank you for your travels. Mr. Harrison, thank you for your teaching. Mr. McInnes, thank you very much for enduring everything you've done. In the Victorian era, we learned that the aristocrats and kings and queens, they reign. And then in the seasons, we have a geographical reign that falls from the clouds. And as we all are hearing right now, we all have our thoughts that we share with each other. So the name of my poem here is Rain, Rain, and Thoughts. Unwanted news, sorry about that, unwanted news greets the truthful news. Deluded death acquaints itself with relentless hope. A way of life to have life. The journeys and the times of travel invade the day. The hopes and the tenacious desires by one address the fatigues of helplessness from another. Visits into the eastern sun envision victory. But the drafty and unwanted but truthful news, it continues. Warm voices are the tones of the voices, and smiles of hope they become. Warm, brisk tones of voice tones, and smiles of hope. In a cold night, frosty hope awoke. But while in hope, it drove itself again into the early morning sun. But there was no sun. The voices of the smiling faces of kindness greet again the life that has seemed frostbitten. Both being kind, watch each other as the new way of life disappears behind the veil. Minutes seem to move into feelings of cool eternity as drowsiness lingered. Instant liberation. Its arrival with raging warmth of the sun returned through the veil. What were tears of rain in the sun are no longer. Glowing smiles of life and joy felt as on a cloudless day in the summer sun, shared by many who hoped with and celebrate hope. Thank you.
Wonderful job, everybody. Thank you so much. Well, I'm going to bring up the rear. I want to read two tonight. The first one is called Directions Concerning His Bones, Hebrews 11:22, and this is about Joseph in the Bible. Not in Egypt, boys, nor Goshen, land of father's latter sojourn, but plant me deep in ground the Lord himself has named for one who brawled with him till dawn. Case me not in coffin wood, so even tongueless I will taste the blood of Canaan, to be spilt by Yahweh in his fury, for the rising of the day of one whose beard will drip with fragrant oil from God's own horn of choosing. Thank you. And the other one is called Saucering, and it's about my maternal grandfather. Of course, I have seen him drink it from styrofoam, sitting and talking to Mama and Daddy between customers at the family store. But he took his first cup alone, sitting still at the kitchen table as the house woke up, not as accompaniment to other doings, but as a meditation. He drank it in the old-timey way, saucering, they called it, tilting the cup, spilling the scalding liquid over the brim, down the side, into the saucer below to cool, discarding the wet cup on the plastic tablecloth, oblivious to the ring Granny would wipe up later. Likewise unconscious of the carpet full of tobacco around his armchair, the debris of another of his reflective routines. He could have afforded ready-mades, but somehow preferred the process of the Prince Albert shake, roll, lick. He was a man who needed cleaning up after, as are all men whose dreams o'erleap their powers. No time for earthly considerations, table wiping, floor sweeping, sleeve buttoning, too busy planning, imagining. At 65, he built a smokehouse for sausage making. At 75, a fishing worm farm. At 95, and entirely blind, he drew me close, conspiratorially confiding with his sideways grin. When I get to where I can see again, we'll fix up that old truck. Lifting saucer to lips with one hand, his unfastened cuff gaping, he alternately blew and slurped and smacked with a sigh. Ah, that's good coffee. As in the moment, as a chess master at the board. But his thoughts were somewhere distant, like a desert contemplative at his gardening, or at his dishes. Thank you. Well, it's been a good night of poetry reading. I do want to give us a little time here at the end for